Welcome to episode 105 of the Maple Leaf Hot Stove Podcast. I'm Nick Ashbourne, joined as always by Anthony Petrielli, also joined by Alec Brownscombe. It feels like the last couple of weeks has been a lot of the same story, and we thought it might be helpful to get a new perspective so Anthony and I are not saying the same things over and over again. Alec, I do want to check in with you before we get into
Five game
Treliving.
winning streak and Alec finds his, or 5 game losing streaks over and Alec finds his voice. Coincidence? I don't know. I don't know.
Before we get into tour living, Alec, I mean, presumably you've been listening to, but we know you've been watching along. Like, what is your impression been of this last kind of dismal stretch for the Leafs? And, what have we been missing here on the pod?
I think you guys have covered a lot of it over the last couple episodes, and I do listen. Unfortunately had to edit them and all the mistakes. But actually, that's not true. You guys are pretty mistake-free in your recordings. Try not to screw it up here.
We'll edit
Uh,
out that comment you made just now for
Yeah,
for this
yeah.
episode.
but in a vacuum, like 9-2 with the injuries and the goaltending they've had, outside of basically a few early Stellaris starts, and then in these last two from Wall, you know, that would not be enough for me to panic really in a vacuum, especially in like the context of the congestion and the standings. I still mostly think they're going to stabilize if they can get most of these injured guys back at the same time without losing some more. And Wall specifically keeps building on his promising start. I thought Wall was legitimately great in both games he's played. It's a massive development. Like, when is the last time the Leafs got two genuinely really good goalie starts back to back like that in a row? Probably.
Last season.
Yeah, last
Well,
season.
I mean, you might be able to squint and argue that, like, when they beat the Rangers, I think it was an OT or 2-1 or whatever it was, and then
Yeah, it was good.
they lost that OT game to Seattle where he was clearly their best player, and at which point he spoke up and was never the same afterwards. I mean, I'm kidding about that, I hope, but
No, that
I,
I think that's a real thing. I'm not like even joking or
I
disregarding
more
that.
meant
Like,
like the he's never the same part. I hope that's not true.
oh yeah,
Uh,
I think he'll be fine. I honestly think he's getting a reset right now more
yeah,
than anything else. It's like get
yeah,
away
and I
from
think,
here.
I mean, what Wall's done in the last two games is huge for rebuilding confidence in a team. Like, I look at that game they won against the Blues, and his save after St. Louis made it 2-2 on the power play,
On
where
Carew.
on Kyrou, where he sprawled to the left and robbed him. That's just a massive and timely save in the context of the game and in context of like where this month is going. It's such a different game if that goes into the third period with St. Louis up 3-2, especially just given the Leafs' fragility and how bad they've looked in third period specifically during this losing streak. Um, I guess more to the point about concerns, it's like it's clearly the brand of hockey that's been on display that's underscoring sort of the main concern in the sense of, I guess, not panic, but definitely urgency. Brad Treliving was pretty candid when he said, even when we've won games, we haven't really felt like we won. We haven't really left the rink feeling good about our game or like we've had a complete performance very often at all, whether that's winning or losing. And I think there's a lot of things that go into that piece about the brand of hockey they're playing and the concerns about it. I don't know if you guys want to jump into that now, but I definitely have some thoughts on it. It just might take me a minute to flesh them out.
Yeah, I
Well,
think we'll
one
get to
thing
that as
I
like
thought
part.
was interesting is that Treliving acknowledged some level of process problem when he said, as you mentioned, like if we could have more losses, some of the wins we have don't necessarily feel like wins, even though we've gotten the points. But then out the other side of his mouth, he expresses all the confidence in the world in Berube. And so it's a little bit like they're acknowledging the problem in the sense that the product on the ice is shit and they can identify it, but they're not necessarily acknowledging that, as the phrase you used just there, the brand of hockey. Like, they're not acknowledging that there's anything wrong with the brand of hockey. They're saying, oh, last year was fine. Berube didn't suddenly become a bad coach. Everything is okay. We just need to kind of execute better. And parts of that is true. If they execute better and they get better goaltending and they get healthier, like, things will look better. But it also feels like there's some level of ignoring underlying issues with, controlling play, controlling the puck that go back to midway through last year.
I have a few feelings on that. So first, like you're right, like it's been trending this way for like 100 games, 100 plus games now under Berube. So like that can't be ignored. Like it's not like they've steadily trended in this direction pretty much from like Christmas on last year. Like they started off well last year, like across the board, and then they ran into all those injuries in November. and they just kind of like stayed afloat. Like they were getting results, but everyone knew that they were, basically just getting points while injured. And I didn't really care because it's like you're injured, so everyone understands that. And then they kind of steadily continued in that direction to your point of it's like, well, you're not necessarily playing like the best brand, but you're getting some level of results. And so I kind of like then tie that to what Alec just said about getting like Joseph Wall back and hopefully Anthony Stolar shortly. Like they're going to get healthy here sooner than later. And on that brand, like they're probably good enough to just play like that with healthy goaltending and make the playoffs. But then the next step to me is like, well, is that going to be good enough to win in the playoffs? And I think people will sit there and say, well, they won more last year in the playoffs than they ever have. And to that, like, obviously that's true. Like, that's fact. You can't disregard that entirely. But the way that they lost down those final few games was like just so, eye-opening and jarring. It wasn't like it was a close game. We all know that. Like they got completely run over at home. But the glass half full take that I'll have on this is that because they've struggled so much this year, it is like almost at the point where they have to acknowledge some level of change is required. Like it's easy to keep playing the way that they did last year because they kept winning. Like you're not going to go back and be like, guys, we got to, change the breakout. We got to adjust this, that, whatever. Everyone's shrug and be like, we're winning. Like, why would we? It's hard to make change when you win. But now that they're losing, there's been a little bit of a difference in some of the things we've heard them say and do. Like, I don't know if they're claiming a Troy Stecher on waivers 3 weeks ago or last season at any point. But you saw him kind of come in his first game, and he looked like a breath of fresh air. Like he's active, like he tries to move the puck cleanly, a little
Does
bit
everything
different,
quick, does
right?
everything fast, right?
Yeah, but is that like a guy you think they would have claimed a month ago or last season at any point? Like I don't, but now they're kind of looking at it and they're going, well, we're not moving the puck well at all. I understand the handedness and Myers isn't playing well. Like there's more to it than just that, but they do need to change a little bit. And I guess that would be the hope, right? That they're sitting there and kind of acknowledging that for the first time. Like, I don't really recall Berube talking about just like actively needing the puck more in the offensive zone the way he has in the past week, pretty much at any point last season. I don't know, Alec, you transcribe basically everything he ever says. Like, you tell me.
No, I'd agree with that. But I would say that as a juxtaposition to that, what we heard from Treliving on Tuesday was like I heard phrases like not connected defensively. We want to play a hard game.
Yeah.
Basically we have to play a hard game to make these systems work, but we're inconsistent in our effort. Or then he said, we're lacking a bit of spirit or energy. He did mention we gave up zone time last season, but not prime scoring opportunities like we are this year. I did not hear at any point we need to have the puck more, or we're
Yeah.
not possessing the puck enough. I mean, the closest I would say that he got was he said getting out of our end. Basically, yeah, sorry, I'll try to find the quote. Getting out of our end a little bit easier and moving pucks is an area we're looking at. That's basically the closest he got. I don't think he's totally unaware of the issue by any means, but I didn't really hear a lot of pointed comments directly hammering that possession point like I kind of wanted to hear. And I think, what gets emphasized gets done, obviously, so we'll see. As for like, I kind of want to I was thinking about this a lot when I was like trying to fall asleep last night after the game about like how we got. I like to think a lot back to like, as Anthony knows, we talk about this a lot, like the Babcock to Keefe transition and then the Keefe to Berube transition. And I think you're often doing this cycle of corrections that might creep into overcorrection sometimes with coaching hires and coaching adjustments. Like when Keefe came in for Babcock, a lot of changes were ushered in immediately, and the improvement was pretty dramatic right away. Even if it was a bit like results wise, it was a bit of a dead cat bounce that season, as it kind of turned out. But like their 5-on-5 metrics dramatically improved across the board. It had clear they had kind of, in hindsight anyway, it's clear they had set the beginnings of a foundation for the possession style they were going to play and largely succeed, at least in the regular season, with Sheldon Keefe. Um, Obviously, they started scoring the lights out immediately. One big change that I know that Keefe ushered in that Matthews and Spezza, I remember specifically talking about, they basically were ruining the fact that under Babs, there was so much rigidity in the offensive zone in terms of like one in the corner, one at the net, one in the high slot, and they became much more dynamic and fluid with their movement and rotations and switches and filling in for one another, which kind of freed them up offensively and let the skill shine. But then the other big thing that happened there was like the way they played the neutral and defensive zones and around breakouts and having the puck. It was like they started regrouping a lot more. They they had a much more focus on puck support and building up the ice in five-man units versus getting so stretched and spaced out and flipping pucks away all the time. They started valuing hanging onto pucks more with regroups, and like generally there was this desire and emphasis on more controlled exits, more controlled entries. And I think Keefe hockey, by and large, it crushed it in the regular season. Like very good possession team mostly during his reign. Good regular season team results wise, well organized, highly skilled team that played a style that seemed to suit them and seemed the players seemed to really like and buy into. The problem obviously is that it got exposed in the playoffs at times where the Leafs would have more of the puck generally, but always seemed to, as Keefe would put it, kind of as his famous final words, the Leafs would beat themselves. They usually weren't helped by their goaltending, but that's also not the full story. Like the famous Keefe quote was that other teams set the game up for the Leafs to beat themselves. And as we all know on this call, like the Leafs often obliged, always obliged in the playoffs, right? So who can forget like the famous like Travis Dermott regroup turn back thing he did against Montreal in overtime instead of just going north with it? Like I think Keefe, if he was to look at those types of plays, he would have said like we're relying on trusting players' instincts and reads, and that sometimes those fail in moments versus something that's like a structural or systemic or philosophical flaw. But I guess the other thing is that like under Keefe, the offense would always dry up in playoff style hockey. Like they would be stuck on the perimeter in the offensive zone. So then fast forward to Berube hockey, right? And sorry, this is taking a while to go through the timeline, but I think it's going to be helpful. Like under Berube, the Leafs stopped beating themselves last season for the most part. Like
Yeah.
the issue now for me is that we're into the second season. Now other teams are just starting to beat them flat out. Like it's to the point where, like we said earlier, like Treliving is saying that even when we've won, it hasn't necessarily felt like we've won, or there's not been enough complete games or ones where you leave feeling happy about the caliber of play. Like last season, the Leafs protected the house very well. They focused on the two net fronts. They didn't give up anything cheap or easy with much frequency. They helped their goaltenders excel. And up until the end of the Florida series, they scored enough as well. So if you're talking about like a 52-48 split, I think I've heard Anthony talk about this on the pod before, and I thought the same thing was like, say if it's 53-47 kind of thing, with the Leafs edging the quality scoring chances, generally having more of the shooting talent than the opposition, you can live with that.
And a healthy goaltending tandem.
Obviously, it relies on good goaltending as well. But the
They're going to
problem
win.
for me is that it's just gotten too lopsided now over time. As Berube hockey has sort of set in over about 100 plus games now. Like we heard Berube losing it in practice the other day over the fact that when they play pucks up the wall, for instance, he wants his guys winning those races and those battles more frequently. Basically, what I hear there is like he wants them to dig in harder and execute the same system they've been playing. They're not necessarily going to introduce new wrinkles or new layers to hopefully have the puck more. He basically wants them to do what they've been doing, but do it harder and do it more consistently. And I think the double-edged sword of Berube's coaching style and philosophy broadly is that it's kind of both a strength and possibly a weakness at times, is that he's extremely simple and consistent and unwavering with his messaging. So now we'll find out for me if is he capable of making more of an adjustment than he's seemingly made so far? Like they're going to come out of this to some degree as they get healthy and the goaltending improves, as we talked about off the top. And I think some of these pieces will click back into place. And I think they can absolutely execute the system they have now better. And they would see better results by doing that. And getting your number one center and your best defenseman and Joseph Wallback, all of that's going to make a massive impact. Fundamentally, though, we come back to the same question, which is they haven't had the puck enough. And it's been a trend line that dates back longer than just this slow start to this season. Like we were sitting here last time I was on this podcast, I guess probably was after the Florida loss. And I went on this like semi-incoherent rant about chickens coming home to roost in game 7, right? Because the Leafs didn't have the puck enough all series really at 5-on-5, and they didn't for too much of the season, particularly in like the back half of the season. It's the fact that we're seeing like a continuation and even a worsening of that trend that concerns me. Like I'm not all the way there on like Treliving should fire Berube tomorrow, but I'm definitely closer than what Treliving seems to be. And to keep him on, I'd like to see more layers in like their breakouts to move up the ice with possession. When they dump it in, I want to see more intelligent puck placements to enable their forecheck. I'd like to see some signs that he's really like coaching his ass off to get the team to hold on to the puck more and tilt the ice more in its favor at 5-on-5. Like I'm not an X's and O's expert as much as Anthony is, but I just want to see signs on like signs of progress in the right direction. And all we're seeing is like the total opposite right now. And I want to see signs that he's working with the players he's got this year and adapting as needed to solve these clear and obvious problems within the team's game. Obvious problems that will ruin the team if they do make the playoffs against anybody half decent at 5-on-5. Like if you squint, there have maybe been some promising signs in the last two games, but like the quality of competition has been really low too.
The other part to that too is like teams are wising up to them, right? Which you kind of implied. Like if you remember last year in the playoffs, Travis Green was spending a lot of time lamenting that the Leafs were blocking shots. Like they couldn't get shots through. It'd be like we have the puck. I feel pretty good about our game, but like we can't get anything through. Like they just pack the house and they clear the net so well. Whereas I fast forward to the beginning of this season, it's like the Bruins sweep the Leafs, and it was after the first time that they beat the Leafs. But Marco Sturm kind of made an offhand comment that was something along the lines of like, we know what they're like at 5-on-5. And like it was basically implying like we knew we would have the puck a lot and like we need to like be mindful of how we're playing with it given how they play, but we know that we will possess the play and run things by and large. So teams have just kind of wised up to it and are just being a little bit more mindful of controlling play against the Leafs and picking and choosing their spots or, you know, how they want to direct pucks to the net or whatever the case is, right? So to your point, it's like, well, that now like they need to adjust to that. I guess again, my biggest positive here would be that it's happening so early and they're struggling so much that they essentially have no choice but to do it. Like it's blatant. Like even Craig Berube's mentioned it a few times now, blatant. So yeah, I guess if you want to be positive about it, it's like, well, failure brings about change, and it feels like at least they're attempting to a little bit.
Yeah, I think the question is going to be what is the extent of that change? We know there are limited options available to them when it comes to roster changes, and that's largely as a result of the fact they've traded away a lot of their assets, but also, you know, that you don't necessarily invest in teams who are playing like this. Like, you know, fast forward a few months, we can have that conversation. Maybe they have a couple of really strong months that feels like a different team. We'll see where we get. Like I end up thinking back to the series they played against the Bruins at the end of the Keefe tenure. And, you know, Anthony and I talked a lot at that time about how teams could just kind of wait to counterpunch the Leafs, like let the Leafs have the puck, kind of do all the things that the Leafs did successfully last year in theory, which was like keep you to the outside, let you have a lot of possession that's not particularly dangerous, wait for you to make the mistake, and then punch you in the face. And it felt like the Leafs were really good at doing that to opponents last year. Like the paradigm kind of flipped where it was like, okay, we can give up some possession, but we're going to be the patient one. We're going to be the mature one. And it's funny that word mature because we've already heard immature used as a word to describe them this season. But last year you got that to some extent. And there were still reasons to question some what was going on. Like it was fairly goaltending driven at times for sure. There's no two ways about it. There were those trend lines, as Anthony mentioned, across the season, but you could see that as a premise at least. It's like, okay, the premise is flipped. Now maybe it's a little bit more defensive minded, a little bit more about shot blocking, clearing the net, but then it's about being more patient than the other team, waiting for them to make a mistake and then capitalizing. And then it seems like you have the worst of both worlds this year, where it's like the other team has the puck, but then there isn't any notable counterpunch, and you're like trying to wait for them to make mistakes, but somehow, even though you have the puck less, you're the team making the mistake. And I think that the premise we saw last season was a bit tenuous. It relied on a lot of things to happen. The goaltending had to be sharp, you know, especially you had to be very precise on like non-dangerous attempts. Like you can't give up any soft goals if you're playing a style where you're kind of allowing people to take shots from non-dangerous areas. They've given up soft goals this year. Like Stolarz has given up a lot of soft goals. that's been a problem. We'll see what happens with Wool. Like you guys said, he's been great so far. But then it just,
Wool's their best regular season goalie. We've been saying this for like he led them in starts last year. He played half the year. He played 41 games last year.
yeah, but Stolarz was fantastic on a per game basis last year. Like he truly was.
But to me, like
was before with Florida. Like
but
it's not
to
like
me,
he's been a bum until now.
part of what makes you a good regular season goalie is being able to play. And I just
Sure.
the messed up thing is I actively trust Wall to play more than Stolarz. Like it's not saying much, but if like going into the year, even with Wall being out to start, if you were to say who thinks can get more starts, I would have still thought Wall. Like
Yeah, that's like value over skill. But either way, like both
yeah,
them.
who do you want for one game is a different story than I'm just saying regular season goalie, 82 game marathon.
And
Joseph Wall's the linchpin there.
quick point there too is like Anthony Stolar is obviously it's not always been his fault. He probably deserved like if he was in different circumstances, not behind really entrenched starters and such, maybe he would have played more throughout his career. But like pretty hard to reach 31 or whatever he is and just be a guy who carries the load versus like Wall is what is he, 4 or 5 years younger than him? It's it's a notable thing, like in terms of carrying the load in the regular season.
Yeah, and also I feel like we should qualify this like larger conversation we're having in general to say like this conversation is based off the idea of being successful in the playoffs. Like I have no doubt if they get healthy, the goalies get rolling, they'll make the playoffs. Like like playing like the classic Berube hockey. It's like, yeah,
I
we'll
have
just
no
defend.
doubt. I know what you mean, but like I have no doubt feels strong. Like I think that like you
I
got to
don't.
be realistic that
There-
the models are saying right now are giving them like a 33% chance to make the playoffs. And I'm not
Nick, are we
I
going to talk
broadly
models? Do
agree
you
with
really want
you.
to talk models?
I broadly agree with you, but I just don't think it can be flicked away. The idea like that the idea of them not making the playoffs is a real possibility. Like I agree with you that I think that those models overstate the chances of that happening. But like I do think that that is a real thing that cannot be totally
He-
dismissed.
Here's why I don't like provided they get healthy again. Like if they get healthy and their goaltending
They
tandems
could get injured
rolling
again though.
and
Like you can get
yeah,
healthy and
well
then get
that
in. If they get healthy, they're not going to stay healthy
yeah.
guaranteed for the course of the
There's
season.
there's not much to indicate that this team will ever stay healthy at any point, to be fair.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I'm just saying I think that they're probably fine either way if
I
they
lean that
get
way too.
healthy. I don't think the East is good. I mean, they've played poorly. They have not been good. Their
The
GM
East
just
is
their GM
shit.
just had a presser where he was like, I don't think we've won a single game, basically. It's like even when we win, we don't win. And they're like 3 points out.
The
Like
East
it's
is
not like
bad.
they haven't dug themselves a hole. Like they're basically like 2 good weeks away. Like they're like Matthews coming back and scoring like 10 goals in 8 games from being like firmly in a playoff spot. And you could quibble and say, well, is Matthews ever doing that again in his career? Maybe not. But I'm ultimately looking and saying, yeah, like I think there's a bunch of guys who probably aren't happy with how they've played. Maybe they're getting like a reset. Like Nick Waugh has 4 points in 19 games or 18 games. Like he's not producing a thing. I think he's been better of late, but like he's not paid $3 million to have a 20-point season. Like at some point, like he might do something and chip in like actual secondary offense. Like, I think Scott Lawton could, right? Like Nyes has been productive, but he hasn't. There's between being productive and good. I don't think he's been good. I just think he's produced a lot. Like I think he has a whole different level of how he can impact a game. Like I just go across the board. Like Chris Tanev clearly their best defenseman, arguably their most important player. Like goaltending
Wasn't
aside,
wasn't himself even before the injury. And this
yeah,
kind of speaks to yourself, to your point. Like this dovetails perfectly, I think, with what Treliving said in the Berube question, which when you're saying like all these guys are punching below their weight, the most stunning part of the whole press conference for me, and I get it, like a GM will always express full commitment, belief, faith in his coach right up until the moment he's announced he's firing him, right? That's just what you do in this business, and that's basically how that makes sense when it comes to how you manage people. But what what got me was the line about, and this kind of dovetails to what you're saying, Anthony, which is like it not mattering who he could possibly acquire via trade right now because it won't change a thing if we keep playing like this. And to the point about how many people are punching below their weight up and down the lineup, that statement by True Living of basically like it doesn't matter who I acquire if we play like this that's a really strong statement to me. I think it was the biggest takeaway from the press conference for me. It points directly at the coach. I don't know how it doesn't. Like to me, if I truly felt that it didn't matter if I altered the player personnel, the team would still play like this. I'd have my coach out the door the next day. Like,
I think that goes back to like where
Yeah.
Treliving's motivation lies, right? Like if Treliving was someone who had an ironclad resume and was treated as like the hockey mind to run this team for the foreseeable future, I think that Berube would be gone already. But because Berube functions as a shield for him for now, like the moment Berube is gone, then I think people starting to ask questions about Treliving. Doesn't mean that he's gone immediately after either, but having the coach, like that is a card in your back pocket that you play as a hockey executive. And I think Treliving is showing a little bit of savvy for self-preservation to not play that card this early, because if he does play it this early, and again, I'm not saying that this is justified, but if the goal is to keep your job, and that is the goal of a lot of people who hold down these jobs, I think that firing Craig Berube today would be a suboptimal way to go about keeping your own job. And again, like maybe that's a too cynical way to think about it, but we've seen this is how executives tend to operate.
I think there's a bunch of possibilities to it. One of them is what you say, which is like the political angle of timing wise and you how many coaching change bullets you get in your chamber as a GM, et cetera, et cetera. It could also be that he's obviously closer to a coaching change than he came across in the press conference. Like no GM questions his coach publicly the day until basically the day he fires him. Um, all the insider reports, though, basically say he's not really that close. It's not really on the table right now, from Friedman and others. My guess is that I guess this is my guess, but it's one other possibility, which is that Treliving really believes in the messaging from Berube. Like it's the style of play that he's philosophically aligned with, and he believes will win in the playoffs. He doesn't think Berube's lost the room. And as he said, the players are saying the right things to him about buying into that message and believing in it, but then they're not executing it on the ice, which is kind of where the disconnect exists. I don't know where I land on that in terms of like, is he playing politics as a little bit? Does he really, really believe in this guy and just thinks if we get healthier and we start actually digging in a bit now that
I mean,
urgency
what's he
kind
gonna
of
come out and say? I don't believe in the guy. Like,
I know he's never going to say that, but like it is crazy to me that he came out and said like wouldn't matter if I changed the player personnel on the team, we'd still be losing games if we play like this. How is that not the most stunning indictment of your head coach? I don't get.
that's fair. Like, there was a lot of like undertone of like this is really disconnected and disjointed, and I'm like, well, who do you think is in charge of it being disconnected? And like, who would you attribute that to? Like the buck has to stop at the coach in that scenario. Like there's no like you if you say like the players aren't buying in to what he's selling, then he's not selling it well enough. Like he's not getting buy-in. Like that again, like no matter which way you slice it, if you're saying that there's a disconnect between what they want to happen and what's actually happening on the ice, end of the day, that lies at the feet of the coach. Like there's no other way to slice it. And then you kind of tack on that like it's just not a confident group right now, obviously. Like they just finished a 5 game losing streak. And you look at these last, couple games here, it's like the LA game, they were just like desperately trying to get to overtime, clearly. Like we all saw it. Like they're just praying to get to overtime and get a point. The Chicago game, they actually played fine the first 2 periods, but then Chicago tied it in the third. And at that point, it just felt like the Leafs again were just trying to get to overtime, and then they couldn't
Yeah,
do it.
I completely agree. Like the third periods, I
St.
was looking
Louis
at
was
this
the same
last night.
way.
Yeah, St. Louis is the same. It's like I looked at the third periods, and everyone's been talking about second periods basically all season with this team. And when you're a poor possession team, I think you get particularly exposed with a long change. So I think there's a lot of, you know, worthy points of discussion around the second period and what it kind of indicates about the team at large. But during this losing streak, or I guess it's now a 1-4-1 stretch in the last 6 games, they have won a game. They've been outscored 7-1 in the third period. And
Yeah,
that to me, it's like they've started games like the first 40 minutes in this losing skid, they're even in goals, for and against. So to your point about confidence, that to me is probably a reflection of a team lacking in it. Like you enter a third period in a tied situation or even up one, like they were against Chicago, and you're just sort of expecting bad things to happen, or you're trying to hold on to a point or a slim lead, and you're not dictating or being aggressive in any way. That's not to say that they haven't shown the ability to sustainably do that anyway, but regardless of the period they're in. But I think the third period have been largely a reflection of that. Like they get there and they have a point on the line, or they've got a slight lead, and they just don't have the confidence to actually dictate and be aggressive and continue to play their way for 40 minutes. That could very well improve as confidence goes up and as they get a few results in their favor, and as goaltending, assuming Wall can keep building on the start, continues to improve.
And it's not going to get as much publicity because of the result, but in the Blues game, I think in the middle of the second period, they were up 26 in shots. Like they had and power plays played some role in that, but like the level of control they had on that game and then completely
Nick, just
let
quickly,
go
it
of the
actually
rope.
didn't play a role in the shots because the Leafs went through a 4-minute double
Well, yeah.
minor, and they registered one shot on goal despite 11 shot attempts. They missed the net 5 times, and Willie had 3 or 4 shots blocked. So they were up, to your point, it was 18-6 or 20-5 to 6 or whatever it was, and they had barely any shots on the double minor power play that they had.
Yeah, I mean, Willie's inability to get a shot through on the power play. I don't know how many power play shots he has at this point, but just has not been that. And I like it's funny because there's been like discourse on Nylander, and a lot of it seems silly to me because it's like the last person you want to blame for anything that's going on. But that is kind of a funky component to what's gone on with the power play. But yeah, like when again, this kind of goes back to what happened a lot of the time last year. Like when the results are good, people don't ask so much questions about the process and about how we got there. And yeah, in that Blues game, and to be fair, like the Blues have a terrible record, and most of that is goaltending. It's like not quite as embarrassing as you might think to lose the handle on the Blues, but they just over the course of the year, 20 games in, you're not seeing any of those complete games. And to be honest, like those quote unquote complete games where a team is in control, start to finish, period by period, is, controlling the play to some degree. Like it's probably rarer than you think, unless you're, very, very top of the standings. But like you want to be able to point to like 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. I don't know how many you exactly want to have, but it just hasn't happened for the Leafs at all. And like that's part of the reason why Treliving has to come out. Like again, it's not just the record alone. It does feel to me like Treliving speaking was a little bit of I just need to announce that I'm not firing the coach type deal, because like that's how hot that had gotten in terms of speculation. It was funny because I saw on Twitter, Anthony, that like someone was giving us shit for the headline of the previous podcast, something to do with coaching changes, and if it was like jumping the gun, and that's not what people are thinking. I'm like, everybody's thinking that like that. And again, like Treliving has now said his piece and none of that is imminent or whatever, but like it was not an invalid thought at all last week to address that, because that was very much in the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, we can all see how they're playing. Like it is what it is. Like that's rightly or wrongly. Yeah, they won the division last year. They won a playoff round, but when you play like that and it's extended and it goes to a 5-game losing streak, it partly hits a point where you have to sit there and say, like, are we potentially willing to punt the season? And as much as a lot is made of like a new coaching bump and the potential benefits, like we saw things go the other way as well last year. That doesn't get nearly as much press, right? Like the Rangers fired their coach. The Bruins fired their coach. They didn't make the playoffs last year, and they did midseason, like they just came out and played poorly. So and then the Blues hired the guy the Bruins fired, and they made the playoffs, and now they look the way that they do, and they're in the predicament they are. Like that's an embarrassing loss for St. Louis. Like they got a point, but like that's an embarrassing loss for them. The Leafs were desperate for a win. But so is St. Louis. Like St. Louis is also finding themselves at the bottom of the standings, and they're playing a Leafs team that, what was that? Like half their forward group and missing their best defenseman. Like that's a bad loss for them. They should have handed the Leafs like that. Like they should have handed it to them all night. So it doesn't always work, right? But eventually it kind of hits a point where you're like, are we accepting this? And is this what it is? And it doesn't seem like they're going to go the coaching route, at least at this point. So, that brings you to the player route. Like, obviously, they just claimed Troy Stecher. That's not obviously going to be like enough. Though I did like Troy Stecher. Like, I knew I would like Troy Stecher going into it. When he went on waivers, I messaged Alec and said that would be a claim
Yeah.
for me. Like that, like he's not only is he like actually right-handed and can move his body and the puck, but he actually makes
The
like
bar
that.
is
Yeah,
so low
the
after
bar is
watching Philip
incredibly low.
Myers.
At points, Troy Stecher looked like Cale Makar to me on that defense compared to what we've seen. And you look at him though, he's actually making less money than Dakota Mermis and Philip Myers. Like they actually save some dollars by eventually waiving those two guys and keeping Stecher. And I could actually see I could logically see Stecher making sense beside pretty much any of their lefties. Actually, all of them, all four of them.
Yeah.
Like if Carlo's back on like whenever Carlo's back, if everybody else is healthy, I'm running McCabe Carlo, getting McCabe back to the left. I'm keeping the Riley Ekman Larson pairing that's producing. I think they're up 8-5 in goals right now, Alec. I know that they're sheltered and used offensively, but they're producing.
Yeah,
And then I'm
you
pairing
could see
Benoit with
that.
Stetcher.
You could see that. You could also see like McCabe, Carlo, Riley, Tanev, which I think they should do more of in general,
Yeah.
and then Oliel Stetcher. Like there's options.
Yeah.
And then Benoit becomes your seven, which I think he's earned.
He's fully, but he also played like 21 minutes last night. Like
Yeah.
they're seeing
I,
something different there than I think everybody else.
but also like ice time that's happening right now, like it's such a
So
skeleton crew of
funky.
a team that like
It
we're gonna see weird shit happen, and
for
that's just not gonna be
sure,
reflected.
for sure you are, but they rate Benoit is the point. Like
Yeah,
as much as I would do that and have Stetcher as the 60, I'm basically just talking the next week though, because who knows when Tanev's gonna be back. It's not gonna be the next week. It sounds like Carlos imminent. You're basically running Benoit Stetcher anyway as your third pair. And you should feel good about that third pair. Like it makes sense stylistically, at least.
well, Benoit
And
cannot play without someone to his right who can move the puck to some degree. Like at
yeah,
times when Benoit has been with Myers or something like it is totally non-functional. And yeah,
yeah.
like
Although I
it.
will say, in fairness to him, like Myers has basically not been NHL caliber. Not basically,
Oh,
he hasn't been. He
he
hasn't been
has
an NHL
not.
defenseman this season.
He's been unbelievably like you don't think he's going to be good, and he's coming vastly below expectation. Like it's been as bad as it gets for Myers this year, which again, you don't want to have to rely on him, but at the beginning of the season, you've got six defensemen who are not going to make it through the whole year. You've got an older group. Some of those guys have had injuries. Like, and again, this is not me saying, oh, they should have planned better because like Myers looked okay occasionally jumping into games last year. And I think they had reason to believe that he wouldn't be this much of a disaster.
It's crazy how much that's turned in terms of like I thought he'd at least be a serviceable 7, 8 kind of guy, but I think he's completely unplayable. Like the Chicago game was the end for me. Like he can't play again anytime soon, possibly at all
No,
this year. In terms of like, so you're 6'5" or whatever he is, you get outmuscled by Frank Nazar, allow like obviously Riley didn't cover himself in glory on that play either, but and then you just start chasing around your own zone and leave your guy open to the back post. It's like what's left to go on there? You're clearly not moving the puck well or producing anything.
you
And
can't
now
lose that battle
you
to
can't lose
Nazar.
that kind of battle. You can't leave your guy wide open the back post for a back. Like it's over. And like it's obviously it's not a one-off. It's a culmination of everything that's happened. Um, one question I want to ask you guys was like I was seeing this kind of get the rounds today about how slow you think the Leafs are because
I
I
don't
think
think they're slow.
Dom at the Athletic tweeted out that basically or shared a piece today by showing how based on basis of data of like speed bursts and stuff to the degree that that means anything I don't know. I think to the point of what we're talking about with the Stetcher ad and some of the blue line stuff, I think it's true on the blue line. Like Stetcher stands out like he's Cale Makar because that blue line has done everything so slowly when it comes to like breaking pucks out with their feet, moving pucks. All of it's just plodding back there. But I don't think the Leafs as a team, like look up front, like Matthews isn't slow. Robertson's fast. Domi's really fast. McMahon is a burner. Willie's a burner. Lorenz can move. Lawton's isn't slow. Nyes looks like he's lost maybe a half a step with his weight added, maybe, but he had plenty of great moments last season where he showed tons of separation and stuff, and
Breakaway speed, legit breakaway
separated
speed.
on breakaways and stuff. To me, we're missing the forest for the trees if we don't say this is teams
They
look
play
slow
slow.
when they're disorganized and they look fast when they're organized.
Yeah,
I
and
think also you've got a lot of guys who clear the threshold of they can skate, but aren't necessarily sort of true burners. Like it's not a team full of true burners. It's like we've talked about before how we've liked McMahon and Nylander on the same line before, usually with Tavares, because like you have a couple guys who can go play together and be on the rush together. Like we see that with Domi, McMahon, and Robertson when they've been successful as a third line has often been through the rush attack, and they haven't had a lot of that. And you're right, like some of that is just how they play. But as much as you can have guys kind of pass the test of like this guy isn't actively slow, not being slow doesn't necessarily mean that you're fast either. And breaking out with their feet, like you saw that with Easton Cowan can do that a little bit. Like one of the things that's nice about him, like his game the last
another guy
couple,
that's not slow, by the way.
Yeah,
not slow,
yeah.
like a
Yeah,
couple games, like if he's able to bury a couple goals, we're having a bit of a little bit more of a celebration what he's done recently. But I think you can be relatively happy with him. It doesn't, they don't feel particularly dynamic because there aren't a ton of guys like that. But I also don't think it's an epidemic. Like a lot of it is the D, because I think a lot of times when people are watching a hockey game, like, man, there's some speed. That is someone going coast to coast. It's coming from the back and transitioning the puck. Like that's one of the things I think to the eye test that picks up speed the most is when guys are traveling the farthest distance. And again, like they just don't have guys on the back end really. Riley's supposed to be doing that. And he's not the guy he was from that perspective anymore. But that I think makes a team look slower at times, is when the defense isn't doing a lot of the traveling with the puck.
I also think a lot of that's overblown, to be honest with you. It's not like the defense isn't skating back and getting the puck. Like, I'm not saying they're fast. I'm not going to sit here and gaslight anybody, but like, it's not like they can't get the puck on the stick. It's when they have the puck, they're making bad decisions, or they're like just rimming the puck or
blindly throwing at the
whatever.
wall.
Yeah,
I think
like,
that's partly how people watch the game, right? They watch the game and their eyes follow the puck. So they're looking at who
but
has the puck, and that's when they're judging speed. They're not looking at the person who doesn't have the puck working their way back or whatever.
but
I
you're
think that when people make those comments, that's part of it.
but you're slow when you can't get to the puck. Like that, like when you see a guy dump the puck in on the forechecks, like Dakota Joshua, slow. Like he's dumping the puck in, he's not arriving on time. That is slow. But I watch their defense by and large, and I'm more frustrated by the way they boot the puck around than anything they do from like a skating standpoint. I think you're reasonably fine from a skating standpoint with Riley, Ekman Larson, now Stecher, McCabe is like he can move his body, like Tanev can move his body. Like these guys aren't ancient.
Benoit
Carlo,
is also
fair
not even
enough.
that slow. Benoit's not
Yeah.
even.
Benoit's actually a good skater when he gets moving. He's just
Yeah.
really bad with the puck's a grenade on his stick. But he can move his body.
He can
And
get deep in the offensive zone, as we've
yeah,
seen in
he
the last
can
couple of weeks. The
he
guy can burn down there.
I really don't think they're a slow team. It reminds me of
no.
like
They
by
just
foot speed alone. It just reminds me of we said the same things at the end of the Babcock era, and then they start or they get into better organization. They start building out of their own zone with possession in 5-man units, and suddenly they look fast. They attack in waves. They look like teams can't cope with them. Like there's not you can't convince me that foot
like
speed wise there's some sort of tangible gap between the Leafs and other teams in the league that play fast, own the puck.
look at some of these other teams that people think are fast or play fast. It's like you're telling me that like Darnell Nurse can skate and Matthias Ekholm can skate. Heck, even Bouchard, like he is a bomb, but he can skate. Like you look at Florida, it's like Aaron Ekblad can skate. Like you're like if you line up Aaron
Yeah.
Ekblad, Darnell Nurse, and Jake McCabe on the goal line and say skate to the other goal line, I think McCabe might win that race.
Yeah.
Like you go, but like Florida plays fast. Like I also don't look at their forward group and say like, wow, burners. Like they have guys that can move. Obviously, like they're not. I'm not saying Florida's slow, but I'm saying like I don't think Barkov is objectively faster than most of the Leafs forwards. Like I'm not looking at like Carter Verhaeghe and being like, wow, that guy can fly out there. They got a few guys that can move, but I don't know if like Nylander was on Florida, is he their fastest forward?
Yeah,
Probably.
I think so.
right? But Florida plays fast because their breakouts are clean and they
Yep.
move as a compact unit up the ice smoothly, and they look like they're flying. Like Florida isn't on paper faster than even the Oilers, but they looked way faster than the Oilers in the Cup final because again, the way they move the puck, like Sam Reinhart is not like it infamously like his knock has always been skating. Like Bennett, I think actually moves around pretty well, but like you kind of go through it, right? They're not. This isn't like an extremely fast team or anything. Yeah, I know. I hear it all the time. It's like they got old and slow. I'm like, well, they're not the oldest team in the league, and I don't think they're nearly as slow as people seem to think that they are. They honestly just look disconnected and like they don't have a plan on the breakout more often than not. And now, for the first time, basically last week, this seems to be a bit more of a priority. It's like they have had longer stretches against both Chicago and St. Louis now, where they've looked faster because they've just moved the puck better, period.
Yeah,
Puck moves
being
faster than
perception
any
is a
player can
huge
skate.
part of that. Like I think people aren't necessarily you're looking at like what is the difference? Even if you look at some of this NHL edge stuff, like you're telling me you're going to identify the difference between someone going, 21.36 kilometers per hour and 22.14 kilometers an hour to the naked eye. Like the reality is the gap between a lot of these players is not necessarily massive. And like you say, the way people perceive them, I think also just it's often the prominent players. Like, what are the prominent players well known for? And Nylander is the only, I think, prominent player on the Leafs who's primarily, not even primarily known for his speed, but like that's known to be the big tool in his toolbox. Whereas, you kind of go down the list with, Matthews and Tavares and some of the other guys. It's not necessarily skating that is at the front of mind with these players. But it's in terms of like things that are causing problems for the Leafs. First of all, this is a relatively intractable thing. It's not like they're going to acquire 5 new players and all of those players are absolute burners. It's going to change the character of the team. So like it kind of is what it is, but also it's just yeah, I think there are definitely other things that they can be focusing on at this point.
Well, Domi's a great example too, in that he's one of the fastest skaters on the team, but they don't necessarily play fast when he's on the ice because he has basically
I
no idea
leave.
where he's going on the ice at any given moment. He manages the puck terribly, et cetera, et
And,
cetera. It's
and
funny you
Quillan
bring,
was fast. He looked good.
yeah. I actually, Anthony knows that I've been all over Quillan since he arrived in the Marlies because I quite like him. Um, Really upsetting how he passed up that chance one-on-one with the goalie.
Awful. Awful. On
But
his backhand, too. It wasn't even like a forehand pass attempt. It's like, let me just sauce over a backhand on a breakaway.
yeah, it was insane. But then he made a nice play to Riley for a really like a grade A look on that same
Yeah.
shift.
On
And
that cut in.
yeah, that was nice. And like he can skate and he's like more power like Berube used the word powerful. And I agree. Like he's like a bit of a fire hydrant kind of low key out there. Like
He's
he
strong.
absolutely I don't know if it was his first shift or his second one, but he ran over Broberg, like just trucked over like a 6'4".
I think it was Tucker or Kessel. I know what you're talking about. It wasn't Broberg for sure though.
Yeah, but like either
Yeah.
way, like
Yeah, he
he's
trucked him.
strong. Like so I mean it's
He-
kind of more of a long-term thing than a like he's
yeah.
gonna help them this
That
season, but
that's the thing. Like people see him flying around and this is kind of where the disconnect happens, right? Like yeah, he was flying around and you could see like I don't want to say he's exciting, but like you could see why they like him and like they view him as like a future NHLer. I would as well. But it's like he got rinsed on the draws. Like he went 0 for
yeah,
5 and they just stopped making him
green.
take faceoffs. Like he was getting cleaned out. And then he played 9 minutes. Like you're not going to trust him on the PK either. And so sometimes people look at that game, throws a hit, skating around. Like I like him. Like I'd keep him up as long as I can right now. But like Nick Waugh's not getting cleaned out 0 for 5 and they're calling it a day for him on the faceoff circle. And Nick Waugh's not sitting on the bench watching Steven Lorentz play 4 minutes on the PK, right? Like
This
that,
this maybe transitions to a conversation about injuries, but like, man, have they had bad timing with injuries? Like you just mentioned Nick Roy, and you mentioned him in your notebook, which was fair in terms of just like how slow of a start it's been offensively and how that's way out of step with the career norms historically for him and stuff. But I thought that game against Chicago was like the best game he had played
he was
maybe all
good.
season. And then of
Easton
course,
Cowan should have had a hat trick in that game.
Yeah.
he gets injured. And that it feels like it's the same thing that happened to Lawton in terms of you start to see him get some traction and then something happens and they get hurt.
I have a big issue with their sports science department. I've been railing on this for years. Like every year, they're top 10 in man games lost, and it feels like guys have nicks and bruises and they sit out. Like, are we gonna hear any of these guys like broke their leg? I don't think so. It's gonna be like, yeah, he's day to day. Like we'll see when he's back, and then they're all like things where it's like, yeah, it took him like a week to feel better, and now he's playing. And look, I don't want to question like the integrity of players and um like, but at the same time, like there's a difference between being hurt and injured, and everyone learns that lesson at like 11 years old when they play hockey. It like there is a difference here, and you're on a 5 game losing streak, and kudos to the guys that actually played and ended up winning the game, but like at some point you got to like dig in and be like, I'm playing. Like if I'm at 70%, we're on a 5 game losing streak, I'm playing because because these are good players that actually help them. The Lawton one we understand.
Yeah.
Obviously, he
And
got a
Canada.
concussion. He got tuned up by Zadorov. I'm not questioning that. But when you hear it's like, yeah, it's like this nagging thing, it's been bothering him for a little bit. Like that bothers me because like at some point you just have to like suck it up and play. And it's not like we see this pay dividends every year in the playoffs. In the playoffs, it's the same thing. Guys
That's
missing.
That's the whole thing right there. Because if they had had consistent success in the playoffs, you could say, like, oh, they do a great job of
Yeah.
keeping
Oh,
their guys
amazing.
fresh throughout the season and they all peak at like, I don't know, cross sport comparison, but like that's what the Los Angeles Dodgers do. Like they keep all their guys fresh as possible. They let them spend a long time on the IL, maybe more than they potentially need because they're like, there's going to come a time where we need all of our horses to be going and then we're going to get serious. And like the Leafs history is the exact opposite of that. Like all their horses have obviously, as we know, not shown up in the biggest moments. So like you can't really point to them being like, wow, that very cautious attitude towards injury has really paid off. It's like the exact opposite of that.
It's,
And
it's a
like
bit it's a
playoffs
bit
is a 2 month
uncomfortable.
war.
Yeah.
Playoffs is a 2 month war. It is a war of attrition. And you just kind of watch it and go like, how would you ever possibly survive a long playoff run? Like it feels impossible.
Yeah, it's a bit of an uncomfortable thing to talk about publicly because it's like you hate speculating on the nature of injuries, the seriousness
Yeah.
of them, insinuating a player should be able to play through this or that without even having like a single inkling as to what the actual medical situation is. But there is like a lot of confusing, incoherent messaging on injuries in the Leafs as well that doesn't help. Like Matthews gets dumped by Zadorov. He tries to retaliate and runs into a brick wall. He then departs the game and is out for weeks. And then afterwards, we hear it had nothing to do with the Zadorov or the Zadorov interaction, and he was already battling something. So he was fine to play. He got involved with Zadorov. He left the lineup for weeks, but it had nothing to do with the Zadorov thing. And
And
then
then
he was
he's
fine
like
to
day to
play.
day, game to
Yeah,
game, but he's not because
it
then
was
he's
fine
not
to play
back.
before. Somehow it got worse, but not in that specific incident that everybody saw that happened right before he left the game. It kind of puts you in this like blender mentally as to what's actually going on with some of their injury situations. I think it's like fair to say though, from like for all the investment in sports science they've done, we're not visibly seeing the clear ROI on
There
that just
is no
yet.
ROI. They don't
Like
play.
they're always near the top of the league in man games lost. They seem to want to take their time with getting players back, and certainly I wouldn't begrudge that in some instances, like you mentioned the Loughton one, but the Tanev head injury, obviously, like that can be a life-altering, career-ending
Yeah,
thing if
that's
it's handled
fair.
handled improperly. And
Fair.
outside looking in, like it seems like a bit of it seems like they use a bit of a load management approach to taking games off for bumps and bruises. That's obviously kind of hard to say because you don't know the extent from the outside, but you know, one thing I will say on the flip side of this, just to play devil's advocate, is like your point about like it doesn't seem to pay off in the playoffs is true. They don't seem to get there. They're right up there in the league, top of the league in man games lost in regular season. They get to the playoffs. They don't seem to have any sort of like freshness advantage or fewer banged up players, like in terms of what they're getting out of it at the end of the day. I agree with all that, but I do think small point, but not a major one. It's like the resources they make available to players in all areas, including medical support, is well regarded league wide, and it's a
Yeah.
selling point to players. Like probably in this day and
Yeah,
age,
because they're signing a bunch of older guys. So it's like, don't worry, we'll take care of
true,
you.
but like
Sure.
probably in this day and age with
A
a modern
nursing
athlete,
home.
like you don't want players feeling pressured to return or have them play through stuff and then have a scenario where something gets way worse and it becomes like career risking or not even just career risking. Say it ruins like a contract year or something.
Yeah.
That stuff gets around the league too. That's all
Part
I'll
of
say.
part of me almost wonders the other way though, where guys are like, yeah, like I would be down to play, and they're like, no, because I haven't heard the best
Yeah, it's
things.
hard to know without being in those interactions, right?
I'll just say I haven't heard the best things from people about like the sports science department and the degree of caution to which they take on,
Well, it reaches a point where it's like you're trying to justify your own existence.
yeah. And I'm kind of sitting here and saying like the whole purpose of your existence is to get guys ready to play games, not to sit there and be like, like my ankle's not the best, but like, I probably could. And then they go, and then they get paid to go like, you know what, you probably shouldn't. And then they just watch and you go, well, what are we preparing you for here? Like, because it's certainly not playoff hockey if you think you're just like gonna ride into that. And you could, to Nick's point about load management, you could justify that if you start 10-5. They're fighting it right now. Like they gotta get their act together. And so it's particularly disappointing when it's like, hey guys, like we actually gotta win games. Like you gotta like, you know, at I'm not saying this guy, or this guy specifically should have, but I'm saying of all the guys that missed, Tanev and Lawton aside, obviously, one of them should have probably been able to suck it up and play.
Well,
And it's the
it's
same story.
impossible to really weigh in too much on individual cases because, like as
Yeah.
Alec mentioned, we don't know the specifics of individual cases. But what you can point to is like the broad pattern over
Yes.
multiple years, and the broad pattern does seem to be a level of caution.
And then the thing that bothers me from this isn't a player thing, this is like a Leafs PR thing, which I think is also important and noteworthy here in the conversation, is they just lie all the time. And that just pisses me off. Like it does. Like, and this isn't like like sometimes like media members get mad about like player availability and like things like that of like interactions that they're gonna have. Like, I don't care about that crap. But like the Leafs are a public trust to some degree. Like they are. Like this isn't just like they might just treat it as like a money making operation and like a business and call it a day. But like to me, like the Leafs are a public trust. And the degree of shadiness by which they operate is just particularly upsetting, speaking solely as a fan. And look, I get it if you're like, Matthews went to Germany and like maybe it's his back or his neck or something, and it's a little bit more sensitive. But like you're watching Scott Laughton in preseason and he broke his foot. Like we know. We all saw it. He took a shot right off the foot and he was out for like 6 weeks. That's a broken foot. Like the team is followed pretty closely. People aren't stupid. But like, did the Leafs ever come out and just be like, Laughton broke his foot. He's going to be out for like a month and a half? No. It's like he's hurt and he's going to miss time. And it's a lower body injury. It's like, why can't you just say it? What you think if the league finds out that Scott Laughton broke something that like guys are gonna go around and like two-hand the shit out of his foot? That's not real. And then I watched like Montreal and last week like Alex Newhook and Caden Gooley had surgery and a full release. Alex Newhook, this surgery out this long. Caden Gooley, this surgery out this long. How is it Montreal can put out public information like that, and the Leafs can't? And then, to potential counterpoint, you'd be like, well, the Leafs can't pick and choose like if they disclose Matthews' injury or not and Scott Laughton's. But they just blanket the whole thing. They just say we're not going to tell anybody anything. And I think it's particularly like I think it's a nonsense approach. And again, that has probably nothing to do with Craig Berube. I don't even know if it has much to do with Brad Treliving, other than I guess in theory he could trump people.
The one thing I'll say about Berube though is that like he's really, really bad at couching things when he gets asked about injuries in like the early stages after the injury. He handles it so poorly that it just
Yeah,
opens season for this kind of like, oh, okay, so because this is how it always goes. As someone who transcribes all of it, they always go, so this injury happened last night. Berube knows almost nothing about it yet. They go, do you expect him to be back for the weekend? Do you expect him to be back for the next game? And Berube will always go,
maybe.
I don't know. I hope so.
Yeah.
I'd hope he could come back. That's my, idea in an ideal world. And that gets reported as, hopeful for the weekend. And then it's like, oh, now he's out weeks. So it looks incoherent when it's just like, if Berube just said, I don't know, end of sentence, none of this stuff would have happened. But to the larger point of what you're saying there is like, it's not just injuries. They've made some strange attempts at lying publicly about basic interactions on the bench we can all see. this year.
Yeah.
When the Columbus thing, when
When
Matthews
Willie, oh, I was asking if he was okay. And it was like, oh, were you?
well,
Is
No,
that
you
that
were.
was insane. But it goes back to like the Columbus game when Matthews goes, no, the timeout was just about reviewing the goal. There was nothing to do with the like very dismissively said it. If you listen to the tone, and basically like no, like the guy
Yeah.
the
It's
question
like a
framed it as
one
like
sentence answer.
what was Berube trying to motivate you guys with on the bench at that time? And he basically came with well, that was
Just
just about the
reviewing the
goal review,
goal. It
just
was just
reviewing
an
the goal.
offside challenge.
Berube 2 minutes later in his own press conference goes like, I was trying to basically kick him in the ass a little bit, and yeah, we did look at the goal, but we weren't that optimistic about a challenge, and mostly I just spoke to the team. So it's like, and then you go to the example about Willie's injury, supposedly checking in on an injury. It's like Berube is clearly scolding him on the bench and saying, "Let's fucking go here, let's wake
He
up
made a
here."
shit play. We all saw it. He
Yeah,
made it.
and you
Everyone
can
knew it.
lip read it so easily. There's HD cameras trained on the bench.
Like, what did he say? Like, let's fucking go here.
He said, "Let's fucking go here. Let's wake
Yeah.
up." That's what he said. You could read his lips so easily. And then
Yeah.
he comes on, he just goes, he acts like he's confused by the question, and then goes, "I was just checking in because I thought he might have been hurt." I guess it kind of did
Isn't
look like
that
he
how
was
you
hurt
ask
'cause-
someone if they're hurt?
I guess it did kind of look like he was hurt because he stopped playing on the play, but that wasn't what was going on the bench. Like
Like,
it's a very strange way of managing the media.
Yeah, like
it's poor. It's poor PR. Honestly, it is.
like the broad umbrella of it is like they treat the media like they're fucking idiots again by like lying to their faces and giving them vague information.
And some of them might be. That part's
Okay,
fair, but
and,
the
like,
fan
listen,
base.
this is not
There's
a
three on this
sympathetic
call.
group. I'm not
Yeah.
out here being like everyone needs to feel sorry for this group, but what I'm saying is like the media is serving a function theoretically of bringing information to the fans. So when you
And
start
that's the bigger
treating the
thing.
media like they're fucking idiots and treat them like shit, then like that does trickle down to the fans who just want to know what's going on with the team. And
Yeah.
like they don't get to know because like it feels like there's this disdain for the media or like, oh, we shouldn't say anything because like the media in Toronto will go crazy with it. So we got to keep everything low key and not really say what's going on. It's like, okay, but now people on the other side who just want to care about this team are like, what the fuck are you doing? And like,
Yeah.
they
The
don't want to
funny
be
thing
treated
is,
like
Nick,
idiots.
when you say about like somewhat betraying trust with media and stuff, it's like it's not like the media ever asks a hard question though.
No,
But
but like
There's just a lot of them in the room.
yeah,
Like they're considered to
100%.
be
Like it's
tough
not
because
like
there are
there's
literally a lot of people in the room.
yeah.
look, I say that like this is like more from my day job, so maybe this is why I feel like it. But like as someone who's worked in PR departments, like corporate PR departments for like 10 plus years, has a master's in it, like the whole thing, they're in this like cycle whereby they don't trust the media and like want to hold everything so close to their vest, so then they give you nothing. But by way of doing that, they just create less trust because they're never clear, consistent in their messaging, and it
Yeah.
just off puts the fan base. Like the media, to your point, Nick, needs to just be a vessel to communicate out to the fans. And instead, fans are constantly being like, what the hell's going on? I would say by and large, the questions I get the most from people are like, what the hell's going on with this guy? What injury does that guy have? Is this guy okay? And it's just like, it's made up. Like, did like there was a point last year with Matthews where it was like, is this guy playing again? And
Well, we just had a before you continue, like we just had a whole media cycle. Like I saw 24 hours of chatter that the reason why Treliving was addressing the media because Matthews is about to get shut down for the year.
yeah, right. And like people are like they're feeling like that constantly. And
Yeah.
look, there might have been a point last year where like they were pretty like iffy on Matthews, but I think generally speaking, they fully intended for him to come back. And like that was like full like there was like probably no real thought in the organization like this guy's like straight up not playing this year. Like again. Like they could have like quelled some of the conversation that was happening by just saying like we're working through it. Like we don't necessarily know when he's coming back, but like that's our intention. And then if it changes, then you come out and you just say, look, like we tried and it took a turn for the worst and he couldn't come back. And instead, it's just like this like shady, like constant like lying and like manipulation and whatever else. And I think it's a poor way to conduct business. I think the players take the wrath of it. That's why we have a conversation we do. It's like, well, what, like your ankle hurt a little bit from your afternoon nap and you couldn't play? And like the organization should take real responsibility for that of how they communicate out with the fan base. It's the most followed team in the league. It has the biggest fan base in the league. They need to do better.
And
Period.
in Treliving, they have a messenger who I think generally presents things in a way that sounds reasonable. Like I think to some of my experience with the Blue Jays where people fucking hate the way that front office speaks and have for years and like have this level of frustration on the type of communication, but not necessarily the content of the communication or the moves. Whereas like the Leafs have the opposite problem where they are okay with the messenger. Like they're okay with Treliving. Treliving has a way of seeming relatively reasonable the way he communicates, like a human being. Like he doesn't seem like a robot all the time. So like just give him human being things to say. And I think he'll do a decent job with it. And it's like there's that disconnect where like the messenger is good, but the message isn't very good. The content isn't there. Like the content, like you said, people just want to know the basics. Like when are people going to be back? What's going on with X player? What is a fair thing to expect? People don't even have a baseline expectation. And like some situations are ambiguous. Like I don't know what you would say about Chris Tanev right now. Like that's a situation that is just going to develop over time, and we don't know. But like some of these other guys, even if you don't have an exact timetable, you can at least set an expectation of like, here is what is broadly going on with this player. Like it is just it's not a high bar to clear. It really isn't. That is a bit of a funny way to end an episode on the quarter poll, but I'm okay to do it. Alec, it is a pleasure to have you on, talk a little bit about the Treliving of it all, the things the Leafs are going through now. It does feel like episode to episode, it has been a roller coaster. There's been 3 losses, 3 wins, 3 losses. At a certain point, I think we'll probably find a little bit of equilibrium, a little bit of more stability, and maybe it'll be a gentler conversation on this podcast, but we'll have to see. We really appreciate everyone who listens in. We appreciate it more when you leave ratings, reviews, things like that. Help us grow the show and watch it also over on YouTube. We'll be back with you again next week.